just wanted to point out before I get started that I have several positions at the University of Virginia. I'm in the School of Architecture as my home base. I'm also in education and also in nursing. It's always glad when your actual institution admires your multiple personalities, but it also speaks to my multidisciplinary and my work. I'd like to start off by the words of Victor Papanek, who's a writer, architect, and educator. His 1971 book, Design for the Real World, he talks about design, and he speaks about it as the matrix of all of our lives. All that we create, all that we construct, and all that we fabricate. And this idea, and this excites the way that I look at design, and also this concept that I've come up with called empathic design. It's an initiative, it's a pedagogy, it's also a professional practice. Within that, I've come up with a cultural, social cultural design thinking methodology for academic, community, and professional contexts. When I say design thinking, I'm thinking about the systematic and rigorous methodologies that designers use, also the modes of inquiry that we come up with. And this idea of design comes from the ideas of Herbert A. Simon, a political scientist and also economist, looking at design as this idea of how you take existing situations and you go through courses of action to improve. The background for the work and also my research comes from my own interest in social cultural design. I've investigated a group called the Spiral Group. Their logo read like a spiral, but it always increased. They got together to actually plan to get to Martin Luther King's 1963 speech, but it actually turned into an entire idea of African American cultural thought, as well as black art. Also, I lived in Canada for 19 years. I worked for a large public institution, the Ontario Science Centre. And you learn about how to design for the entire world. The entire world were our clients, not only through the door, but also that we produce exhibitions that were shipped around the entire world. Designs and methods I just brought up, but also ideas of Horace Riddle, the design theorist, about wicked problems. The idea that these wicked problems are things that we're looking at complexities within our social cultural systems. But also looking at ideas from Patrick Hutchins. He's an architect and educator from Leeds, University of Leeds. He came up with an idea of 5 different stages of going through designing and making. Within my professional practice, my background has ranged from everything from mausoleums to jails to schools, to various budgets for all those different types of projects, but also thinking about the work at the Science Center and our global outlook, but also living in Charlottesville. I actually graduated from the University of Virginia, came there in 1989, left in 93, came back to teach in 2016. And seeing what's happened there socially and culturally also impacted my work. It's incredibly difficult to think about collaboration in a divisive context. The method I've used to create not only designs for Dr. Carter G. Woodson, he's known as the father of Black history, his birth site in New Canton, just an hour from Charlottesville, also into an exhibition which is traveling right now, to a program called UDEA in the eastern region of Ghana, where we're looking at telemedicine models. This very summer we're actually implementing a telemedicine model, which you'll see. The idea at the bottom is We Are Martinsville. It's an actual app that not only creates creative placemaking in the city of Martinsville, Virginia, the southwest part of the state, but it also gets kids out around the city and burns off some calories, which is always a good idea. There's a group called The Trace. They're Bloomberg's extension of journalism. That's a project called Sense Parkland. If you look at senseparkland.org, what they did was we worked with a series of workshops with them, and we came up with the idea of telling human interest stories. 12,000 kids shot since Parkland. And the idea that when you go on the site, you get a background story of each person. Also, James Monroe's Highland, which we're working on now in academic and also community connection. With that site, if you know the history of James Monroe's site, they actually have the wrong house. So the idea is, how do you now tell that new narrative? But also, do you also connect the narratives of the enslaved at the site? This is the actual process. It's called the Mosaic. It's also coming off this idea of John Murray Gibbons' concept of Mosaic behavior that you see in Canada, but also an idea of how to respect everyone who's integrated within a collaborative process. It starts off with stage 1, which is empathic discovery. Stage 2 is a social, cultural, experiential designing and making process. Stage 3 is for empathic implementation. If you look here at this graphic, it kind of devises and talks about the different stages as you go through developing an idea in your design thinking, from identification to realization, these steps in the center, which are based on the Patrick Hutchins ideas. So I'd like to show you a project, and a lot of projects, clearly from my empathic background, come from a personal experience and connection. I've been longing to look for a project to connect to medical and also basically health care. A friend of mine died in possibly one of the worst designed hospital rooms I've ever seen. Claudio talked about the beige sensibility of the room itself, but my friend is incredibly smart and looked at me at one point and said, "Hey, aren't you a designer? Isn't this your fault?" And it stuck with me over the years. And I thought to myself, how do you think about spaces? How do you connect in spaces? What is the role of design? And within this framework, I came up with 6 spaces for design. There's spaces, systems, objects, products, graphics, and experiences. So I'd like to show you how that connects with this project, which is called Using Design Thinking to Reshape Interprofessional Curricula for Healthcare Trainees. It's funded by the University of Virginia, the 3 Cavaliers Project. It's a rapid seed funding program, but you can see our project team here. It really speaks to this idea of collaboration. Heading from the nursing, again with nursing, interprofessional research and education, coming to the associate professor of emergency medicine and public health, to the course director there at internship readiness course, and then also to graduate students. We're working with graduate students from architecture, nursing, and education. Within this, and a lot of the cards I'm going to show you are actual cards that we're using in a series of interviews, but this is one of the cards that we're using which defines the ideas of interprofessional collaboration with the WHO as coordinated care of patients by a collaborative team of healthcare providers demonstrating mutual respect for each other. In this point in the interview, we actually asked people what interprofessional collaborative practice means to you. But this is, again, helping us come up with ideas of design of how to work together and also prototype concepts. Lots of the base of our work is based on those interviews. And David spoke about this idea of how designers work and connecting back. And so we have healthcare teams, about 20 interviews there, which range from clinical faculty nurses to administrators, 10 students, current medical students, nursing students, to new grads. Healthcare consumers, there's 10 of those, patients from nursing and medical staff. The idea there is to get a really double view on the issues. Caretakers, and then design thinkers in the field. And at the UVA, there are plenty. Well, everyone who works in this process, in academic, community, and also professional, get 2 white papers. And these 2 white papers, the one on the left is Dr. Teresa Weissman's concept analysis of empathy, and the one on the left is Dr. Helen Rice and Gordon Graff Todd's a tool to enhance nonverbal communication between clinicians and their patients. For Dr. Weissman, it's this idea of cognitive empathy, this connection between seeing another perspective, actually hearing back what you hear, and how do you translate that words back, and also not being judgmental as you're hearing information. Empathy connects this idea of eye connection, musculature when you're speaking with someone to notice someone's musculature in their face. There's movement. P for your posture. A, noticing someone's affect. T, the tone of voice that you're using. H, to go back to this idea of your hearing. And Y, to be your response. So you get these readings and then you practice. In academics, it's fun because I told students you cannot use your phones. They have to go away, which also brings about this incredible pain moment. But then there's a moment where you have to connect. And how do you practice this? How do you practice it? On top of that, we add active listening, and that actually sets up an idea and a dynamic of how to interview. This actually is also demonstrated with the graduate students on this project who also will be interviewing. You also get a background of how designers think. Keith Dorst is from the University of Technology in Sydney. This idea of logic, you can think about how deduction works and induction works. But the idea of how designers work is based on abduction. Not only do you know what the what is, which is the thing, the how is your working principle, leading to value. In deduction, you know the what and the how. Induction, you don't know the how. But in abduction, and there's 2 different versions he says here, it's actually the second that we focus on. What is the thing? What is the working principle? And then what are your inspired values? A lot of these interviews then focus on what these inspired values are and coming up with them. This shows you an exercise of what happens when you go through those 3. The what to the how and the inspired value. This was done with our leadership team in connection, but also to think about this is an exercise that happens during our interviews. So imagine here that you have new empathic practices. How is your transparency, unit knowledge, and maximize your skill set, and your inspired values are understanding. This becomes a guide as you work throughout the project and you know about the duration of the projects to remind ourselves, not only in the leadership team, but also in smaller teams, about your steps and your logic thinking. What follows are a series of cards that we use in our interviews to show what the 6 different design ideas are and concepts. This is systems, an idea of a patient-centered medical home on the left, and a care team role space on the right. Spaces, this is a U of M AHC simulation center. You'll probably notice when you see some of these images that they're maybe dated or current. The idea is that these are prompts. We don't want to say that we have the answers. We want to see what people come back with. This is objects, the idea of objects, gadgets, and also devices. So you have a hip socket on the left and a washable hospital bed on the right. To products, this is basically the idea of a process or collaborative process to a smart inhaler, telemedicine, and robotic surgery. This is experiences, rounding the heart. This is structured interdisciplinary bedside rounding or heart rounds. And graphics, the idea of the Auckland Hospital for wayfinding and signage. So the idea of what happens when you transfer yourself throughout a hospital. You may be wondering right now, where's the emergency room? Where's the hospital room? That's done on purpose. The idea is that we want to say feedback, clear feedback of what those design movements are. These are some of the series of the questions and going through the different stages, starting with identification. But this also comes about during the analysis and synthesis part. The idea that coming through the demographic questions, basic interprofessional questions, and questions that occur, for instance, new graduates here, give us information that we later synthesize. You can also see that this sets up a series of patterns. We find out what the patterns are, what are the consistencies in the answers and replies. Right now, you're right about here. And then also, we show those 6 cards that you just saw, and also continuing back onto other questions, such as the ones for patient caregivers and questions that go to all. Now, one of the things I love about design is the idea of visualization. So we look at references in the Mosaic process that are social, cultural, and are also different representations than maybe what people are normally used to seeing. This is by Florence Nightingale, this diagram on the left. This is the diagram of the causes of mortality. And the blue is preventable diseases. The red, as in red for blood, are wounds. And the black, shown here, are other causes. You can see how it's broken out by month. This is W.E.B. Du Bois. Here on the side, this is done with his students for the 1900 Paris exhibition. And this is about taxable property in Georgia. The idea that all the findings that we get, we'll bring them back, and this becomes part of our final report, but done in a way that connects in a new social cultural way. Also, in a really interesting way that the information can be disseminated in a really clear fashion. Part of the idea when we head to stage 2D in ideation is prototyping, and this is one of the prototypes we plan to take. We've been working a lot with the Center of Teaching Excellence, and this is an idea that we use in academic settings to look at ideas of empathy. But this is a survey, and in the survey it goes through perspective taking, emotional contagion, online simulation, peripheral responsivity. And in this idea too, you can see in the perspective taking how the team member part becomes a series of questions. And these questions are asked at different times to find out what the shifts and changes will actually occur. A lot of my work when you head to stage 3 is from my design thinking practice. And in the practice itself, it's setting up actual situations, setting up workspaces that then get to these ideas and get to these designs. And you can see here on the left is that work with the trace that was in New York City. This is Rollins College to think about new social cultural connections to their syllabi in Winter Park. And this is in Act for Alexandria in Alexandria, Virginia, to look at new ways of community engagement. So we plan on doing this at the Collaborating Across Borders conference in this October to take those ideas to the next step. But clearly this all then becomes part of a report to 3 Cabs and also becomes disseminated publicly. I did want to close with this project just to show again how this process works. This very summer we'll be constructing, we've got a shipping container and won $15,000 from the E-Cup at the University of Virginia. And this is the progress work we did in 2017 with the UDIA project. The idea is that we've come up with a telemedicine model which will be now implemented in an actual town of It'll be located near the regional hospital, But the idea is that we've designed what that system is with locals. This is from 3 different universities and the local hospital. It'll become a brand new telemedicine model which fits with the needs that we did through research. We found out the existing levels of technology in the town before we do it. And that connection then will become part of an actual mobile unit, and you can see parts of the design here that connects with the app. That's what leaves me incredibly excited about the idea of design and design thinking in these spaces. It allows you to be open to new creativity, but it also takes a real understanding of actual needs